Now this is part 4 of the draft paper. Part 1 covered the introduction and stats, part 2 covered the Earth 2 player, and part 3 covered economics. Feel free to go check those out. I will drop links in the description below, but just to be safe, I'll add the Earth 2 disclaimer just to ensure it's been heard, and then we'll move on to the main content. The content provided in this draft summary and Earth 2 update is intended solely to provide a general background information about Earth 2's proposed objectives. It should not be interpreted as a white paper, disclosure statement, representation, or promise. The content should be considered as an indicative update but remains subject to change without notice. The information in this update was posted with reasonable care and attention. However, no representation or warranty or express or implied is made by Earth 2 as to the fairness, accuracy, completeness or correctness of this information, opinions and conclusions contained in this draft, summary and update. Earth 2 disclaims all liability for direct or indirect losses resulting from using, relying or acting upon information in the draft summary and update. And so do I for that matter. Economic components. The Mentor. The Mentor is a building that is essential for gameplay in Earth 2. They detect ether when it evaporates from the land on the property they are built on and turn it into essence. Mentors also have the ability to be slotted with jewels. The bigger the property, the larger the slot range on the Mentor. Slotting jewels on your property improves its performance of production of resources and essence through the jewels modifier effect. If you don't have mentors yet, be sure to get those built and start collecting your essence. There's a step-by-step guide to getting your mentors and collecting essence on this channel if you need it. Ether. Ether is an unstable, difficult to detect and somewhat mysterious matter that evaporates from player-owned land inside Earth 2. Theory has it that when virtual land is claimed and a player's presence is recorded in the binary code of that land, the land itself commits to improving its own environment to the will of the player who owns it. Ether cannot be captured or stored naturally, but can be detected by a mentor, and if processed quickly enough by that mentor, can convert into the very storable and collectible essence. Enough is not yet known about ether, but it would seem that not all ether is identical, which is evident in the varying ether to essence conversion yields. We know that when captured early enough, ether always yields some essence, but never more essence than ether. The varying essence is likely referring to tier 1 versus tier 2 land. I have a separate video on that, so feel free to go check it out. But there's also EDC or promised essence. This tends to have a higher conversion rate than organic essence too. Jewels. Jewels have a certain chance of spawning on a player's property and must be claimed within a limited period of time, after which they vanish again. Jewels are distinguished by tiers, and each tier has additional levels of quality, which all affect the jewel's value. Players can collect jewels, craft them into higher tiers and quality levels, slot them into the mentors, and use them to improve and better target their eco-sim production. Jewel utility will expand into other areas of the Earth 2 metaverse as new features and products are released. Depending on the size, tier, and tile class of a property, the mentor will have between 1 and 15 slots that can be slotted with jewels. Jewels have a number of effects on the ecosim of a property, and the effectiveness is dependent on their colour, tier, and quality attributes. These include increasing the effectiveness of producing a certain raw material, accelerating production of certain building blocks, increasing the chance of ether detection rate, increasing the yield of essence when reaching certain stages in the ecosystem, and reducing the research and or construction times and costs. Personally, other than unlocking all recipes and creating some to make the jewel crafting videos, I'm just holding on to my tier 1 jewels and slotting them as they come. That way I'm not only increasing my overall ether detection, but it also means I have a huge stock of base jewels to craft whatever I need later in development. Jewel crafting. Jewels have a crafting system that allows players to experiment with combining them to create jewels of higher tiers. The quality and tier of a crafting outcome will depend on the quality and tier of the jewel used in the crafting process. Over time, players will discover new recipes they can use to ensure the quality and accuracy of their eco-sim production. There are undiscovered effects from not so obvious recipes, which may create a single jewel with combined effects that otherwise would use a higher number of slots. Such jewels require an explorative mind to find them and will carry the name of their discoverers in the future. These recipes will be part of an ongoing design effort as the eco-sim develops and matures. Crafting is available as a tab in the jewel storage window. With this feature, players are currently able to shatter jewels into shards, improve jewels with shards and essence, craft new jewels using shards or multiple jewels from their inventory, and discover, unlock and browse jewel recipes. From not so obvious recipes, to me that implies there's undiscovered recipes that were not shown on the missing recipes list, although it does then go on to say these will carry the names of their discoverers in the future. Does that mean that the jewels can't be crafted yet, or are they just none named after those that have discovered them yet? What do you think? Jewel slotting. The slotting tab of the jewel storage window is where players can slot jewels from their jewel inventory into their properties mentors. As mentioned previously, slotted jewels will affect a property's ether detection rate, resource production, and other property related production in the future. The jewel slotting window also shows critical information needed for players to make decisions on what jewels and jewel combinations to slot into their properties mentors. Resources. Forget all you know about how resources are mined on our physical Earth. Inside Earth 2, they are no longer dug up, snatched from a pillaged soil or stolen from an exploited Earth, as there are no more mines. The first set of resources to exist will be oil, coal, gold, limestone, fresh water, wood, sand, and iron. In Earth 2, resources are replicated, not mined, into raw materials. The process requires essence as a critical source of data to complete successfully. Raw materials are replicated from the core binary code that is found under or on the soil of a property, or from what grows on it. Mentors process the ether that evaporates from the ground and turns it into essence. The weaver, located inside the mentor, evaluates the binary representation of soil around the resource contained within the captured essence, and uses that data, if compatible, to replicate the raw material. The more advanced the technology is, the smaller the amount of a particular raw material can be while still being readable and replicable by the weaver. Everything is woven primarily from hydrogen, but also contains carbon dioxide and other atmospheric gases. Hydrogen alone makes up about 3% of the mass of the Earth's crust. In total, the Earth is estimated to contain about 1.8 to the power of 1018 tons of hydrogen. It would take the world's 2011 concrete production 500 million years to equal that amount. But lessons have been learned. Technologies to store the hydrogen from waste are already under development. Hydrogen should not become a finite resource. Raw materials are a core part of what everything is built from in Earth 2. Almost every type of building developed inside the Earth 2 needs raw materials for construction. They have a fixed place in both the production chain and the economy of Earth 2. Raw materials are copied from existing raw materials of a property. Once they exist in their pure form, raw materials can be traded and used for other types of production. In fact, there can be no building production without raw materials in their pure form present in that location where the production is taking place. While raw materials are mostly used for construction ecosim buildings and produce building blocks, they will also be necessary for research, upgrades and maintenance. So there we go, that's a new name. I don't think we've heard of the weaver inside the mentor before. The raw materials needing to be present in the location is also a little bit of an odd read, I don't think that means it can't be built in areas unless all materials naturally exist there, even though that's kind of how it reads, but instead I'm going to take it as we need to move resources there before anything can begin. Instead of resources being consumed from a central location, maybe we need to prepare and transport first. Raw material tiers. The diversity of raw materials used for the ecosim will grow over time in technological tiers. There will be 8 raw materials to begin with, but over time it is planned for the number to grow into 2-digit numbers and possibly beyond. Raw material tiers serve a number of different purposes. Introducing a development hierarchy into the building components of the metaverse. Supporting early diversification and specialization. Supporting the development of a special class of players who will have the opportunity to work their way up until they can afford their own land and assets without the need to outlay any initial funds and without running the danger of being exploited and held asset poor and dependent. Safeguarding this play to earn opportunity. A more simplified initial gameplay will be introduced in this specified area, teaching players how to play the game during the first technological tiers, and then widening the possibilities significantly so as to increase the complexities of managing larger land ownerships by a single person, thus creating a need for cooperation and collaboration on Earth 2. Progressively, we will introduce a very broad raw material tree, which will make it very difficult for a single player to successfully produce all the different kinds of raw materials, especially ones of higher tiers. The specialization of players in particular areas will force trade to be a necessity in order for them to achieve the most out of the Earth 2 ecosim. Creating a hierarchy of raw materials will encourage player-to-player trading, and the development that will continue over years to come will involve players in the process via voting rights where possible. So there we go. We're going to be specialising in certain types of resources, and it's unlikely players will be able to cover them all. I like that they're going more into the free-to-play elements too, players being able to work their way up to land ownership without any sort of deposit going into Earth 2. I think that'll entice a lot of people because there's no risk of loss. Mechanics. Weavers of a certain tier will use essence to produce a set amount of raw materials, measured in storage units per tile. Let's say in tier 1, that amount is 100 storage units. 1. Each raw material existing in the ground is a relative ratio to all other detectable raw materials. This ratio is called occurrence. The respective number of units per tile will be turned into raw material. For example, if a tile has 12% wood, comparative to all other detective resources, 12 storage units of wood can be produced if the mentor has a dual socketed, which primes the production of wood. Each raw material is produced in various cubic meter amounts per storage unit. All detectable occurrences combined make up 100% of the producible raw material. Thus, in a new tier, the occurrences must be added to the old tiers and then weighted to make up for the 100% of producible units. A heat map will display the distribution of raw materials that exist on player-owned properties. With each new technological tier, the weaver will need to receive an update to allow access to the raw materials in the new tier. Access to all tier raw materials will remain. These raw materials will be added to the possible ground yield in the raw materials heat map. The addition will subsequently alter the occurrence of all other raw materials. The overall production capabilities of the weaver will increase. Once the research and construction of the next tier weaver is complete, the weaver can produce these raw materials according to their new occurrence in their respective property. More about the weaver there, and possibly more insightful than it sounds at first. We now know buildings are going to have parts which can be upgraded and changed, so even though two players might have the same building, they might end up performing very different tasks or having very different production rates. If we're already looking at stuff this customizable for the ecosim, I can't even begin to imagine how big the tech trees are and where this will end up years from now. Hopefully the learning curve isn't too steep and it's enjoyable for all players. Initial creation of a currency resource data resource validation. The magic and intrigue of the Earth 2 metaverse is that the place where you stand in the real Earth is represented in the exact geolocation inside of Earth 2. This bridge between the two worlds is fundamental for establishing and setting the foundations and various components of Earth 2. Thus, the accurate implementation of raw materials and resource locations was a crucial factor for Earth 2. A significant amount of time was spent to ensure that the placement of key resources was as realistic as possible. We achieved this both internally and via silent partners and have a base for resource locations consistent of over 200 million data points, measuring in over 500 gigabytes in size. But for us, this was still not accurate enough, and the PRV program we have developed will allow players to claim and validate real-world resource locations over a selected period of time, strengthening the existing data implemented. At a very high level, this collaborative effort will see Earth 2 provide a claims manager where players can see all claims and create their own claims, a map representation where players can see areas with open claims, an internal tool where Earth 2 staff can monitor insights about claims, identify claims with higher validations, and review for potential approval. This will be one of the first Essence reward systems where players can earn additional Essence for correctly verifying players' created claims. Read more about the process here, I'll leave the link below. So that's it for the economic component section, and I must admit I'm looking forward to seeing how the player validation is implemented and the rewards that come with it. Do you guys have any thoughts on this section, or did you notice anything that I've missed? Feel free to let me know in the comments below. As always, thanks for watching, don't forget to like and subscribe, and have an amazing day.